Stories that time forgot.
Imagine you are using the most powerful tool in human history, but the name of the man who actually made it possible has been scrubbed from every official record so a corporation could take the glory. The engineer who designed the modern internet and was erased. El Segundo, California, 1961. What you are about to discover in the next few minutes isn't the sugar-coated version they teach in universities. It's the chronicle of how a lone genius in a California office cracked the code of the future and was rewarded with absolute silence. Stay until the end, because what you'll learn today will forever change how you understand the dark side of innovation segment on this channel, revealing that the network connecting us all was born from a mind the system decided to disconnect from history. Imagine you are there, in a technical office at the Rand Corporation, surrounded by chalkboards filled with equations and the constant hum of computers that take up entire rooms. You are Paul Baran, a man with a calm gaze, but an electric mind, and you have a mission that seems impossible. Design a communication network that can survive a Soviet nuclear attack. The air in the office smells of ozone and paper singed by vacuum tubes. Outside, the world lives under the shadow of the Cold War, with the constant fear that a single missile could end everything in a second. Have you ever wondered how we went from sending letters by mail to having your data travel the globe in milliseconds? The answer was born on this engineer's desk, who understood that for a system to be indestructible, it shouldn't have a center, but rather be a web of intelligent nodes looking out for one another. As we've discovered in other cases within the dark side of innovation segment here on Stories Time Forgot, genius is often punished by bureaucracy when it threatens the established order. Paul Baran invented what we now call packet switching, the idea of breaking a message into small chunks and sending them through different routes to reunite at the destination. It turns out that, in 1962, this idea was so revolutionary that engineers at the giant telephone company AT&T laughed right in his face. They told him his system simply wouldn't work, not because it was bad, but because they hadn't invented it first and didn't want to change their profitable but obsolete copper wire networks. As you investigate alongside Baran during those years of rejection, you realize the system was designed to protect monopoly interests over human progress. The atmosphere in high-level meetings in Washington is one of unbearable technical arrogance. The protagonist of this story watches as his project, the exact blueprint of today's internet, is filed away in a gray folder while others begin to take his ideas without giving him credit. The first act of this technological tragedy ends when Baran, fed up with fighting giants who refuse to see, decides to walk away from the project and let his papers gather dust. But what comes next is even darker, because you'll discover how, years later, when the ARPANET was launched, Baran's name was systematically omitted from the original press releases to favor other scientists closer to political power. How would you react if you knew the technology you're using to watch this video was rejected 60 years ago because a phone company didn't want to admit a lone engineer was right? The second act takes us to the labs where the physical web of the internet was forged. The pressure is immense. The military needs results, but official scientists are stuck in old models. They start to notice that Baran's ideas on redundancy and distributed nodes are the only viable solution. The sensory atmosphere turns into a dense secrecy. It's the contrast between the silence of the Pentagon, hallways, and the frenzy of the labs where the first 4 nodes of the network are being connected. Baran watches from a distance, seeing his technological child grow up with other last names, while he continues working on minor inventions just to get by. At this point in the story, the suspense is absolute. Technology historians discovered decades later that without Baran's original diagrams from 1964, the internet simply wouldn't exist as we know it. The paradox is that he never sought fame or money, yet the system ensured he had neither for most of his life. This technique of erasing the original architect so others can wear the metals is the same one we'll see in our next episode when we analyze the physicist who discovered cold fusion and vanished without a trace, proving that in the world of science, ego can be more destructive than a hydrogen bomb. The third act is the moment of late, yet insufficient recognition. By the 90s, when the internet explodes and becomes a global phenomenon, some researchers begin to salvage documents from the RAND Corporation. The sound of a new generation of hackers' keyboards brings the truth to light. The day after the studies on the real origin of the network were published, the technical world had to admit that Paul Baran was the true father of the creation. However, by then, big corporations had already patented variations of his ideas and were splitting the telecommunications pie. The international financial messaging system was already moving trillions of dollars over an infrastructure Baran designed for free to save the world from nuclear chaos. However, the end of this story has a taste of poetic justice. Although Baran died in 2011 without being a media celebrity like other Silicon Valley pioneers, his legacy is every bit traveling through the network. He lost the race for public glory, but he won the battle for the future. He managed to prove that a powerful idea, once released into the world, cannot be erased no matter how hard those in power try to burn the blueprints. The erased engineer lives on in every text message, every bank transaction, and every connection we make today, even if his face doesn't appear in primary school textbooks. Before we finish, I must tell you that the next case we'll unearth in this dark side of innovation segment is equally shocking. It's about the physicist who discovered cold fusion and disappeared without a trace. We'll see how a promise of infinite, cheap energy was crushed in a matter of weeks by a smear campaign that still hides many unanswered questions today. You can't miss it if you want to understand how the system protects its traditional energy sources at any cost. Now that you know the story of the man who connected the world and was rewarded with oblivion, I ask you, do you think the history of technology is written by geniuses, or is it written by the marketing departments of the big companies that buy their patents? Leave me your thoughts in the comments, because your perspective is essential to completing this historical puzzle. Subscribe so the system notifies you when we unearth the next piece of the puzzle in Stories Time Forgot. Your support is what allows us to keep investigating these truths that power tried to erase forever. See you in the next section of our Library of Secrets.